Hi, welcome to the 14-day weather forecast. It's a very wintry picture right across the UK at the moment, with snow in places, mostly northern Scotland and southeastern England. And here's a picture I took in Berkhamsted on the 12th. The Grand Union Canal there is frozen over and there's a fair amount of snow on the ground. Some very low temperatures have been recorded. The lowest I've seen so far is minus 17.3 Celsius in the Scottish Highlands. Now, is winter set to stay with us during the next 2 weeks, or will things change? I'm going to start by taking a look at the view across Europe and the North Atlantic. The animation runs from 18 GMT, Tuesday the 13th. At the outset, as I've said already, it's a very cold picture. Winds coming down from the north, the northeast, low pressure though to the southwest, and that is something to keep an eye on in the short term because it's pushing up weather fronts towards the United Kingdom, those bringing outbreaks of rain, and as they bump into the southwest, they turn to sleet or snow. I don't think they're going to be too widespread, but they are something to keep an eye on. Then, as we go into the weekend, things begin to change. Another low pressure starts pushing up from the southwest, and this time it looks like it's going to send outbreaks of cloud and rain right across the UK. Winds turn into a southwesterly direction and it turns milder for a time. But at the very end here, high pressures build into the west once more and colder air is sweeping southeastwards. The white shading suggesting a risk of snow returning to the northern half of the United Kingdom. A lot taking place through the first week, and I'll come back to some of the details a little bit later. It's just worth also having a look at the air temperature profile associated with that GFS run. On these sequences, the blue shading is really being used to indicate cold air for the time of the year. I'll just quickly run the animation. At the outset there, all of the UK is under the blues. There's a low pressure to the southwest. The blues stay over the UK through the first few days, but then there's the milder air pushing it from the southwest through the weekend. Towards the very end, though, as low pressure moves away northeastwards, colder air begins to return southwards. So, as I say, there is a lot taking place. Quick look at the temperature forecasts for the ground level, so the ones we actually experienced rather than aloft, which the sequence showed. Wednesday the 14th, it's a very cold picture, just 1 or 2 degrees above freezing point in southern and central regions, staying below it in the north. Some very cold nights in the short term as well, widespread frosts, severe at times. This is just to illustrate. Friday the 16th, minus 3s, 4s and 5s in southern and central regions, colder as you head northwards. And I would expect values to actually dip down a few degrees lower than these are showing in 1 or 2 places. These are just broad brush figures. Freezing fog could also be an issue. Into Friday afternoon, not much has changed. It's still very, very cold, just hovering around freezing points across much of the UK. But by Sunday, change is starting to shape up. This is when we've got those outbreaks of rain pushing northeastwards. Could be some transitional snow associated with them, which I'll look at in a moment. But already it's a lot milder in Northern Ireland, southwestern Wales and southwestern England, double figures returning. Still cold though in central and eastern Britain. There is some uncertainty about the exact timing of this transition back to milder conditions and how far northwards it's going to spread, but I'll look at that as well. By Monday the 19th, almost spring-like according to this GFS model run. 13s, 14s, maybe even 15 Celsius there in central and eastern England. Much, much milder than we have to begin with, where temperatures are really struggling to get above freezing point. So a big change, at least for a short time, because then by Tuesday, it's turning colder once again. Single figures across the UK and distinctly chilly there in the northern half of the country. And that was associated with the low pressure moving away northeastwards and colder air moving down from the north, the northwest. There are a number of things to look out for during the first week, as I've hinted. Just take a quick look at some of those. Wednesday the 14th, so right at the beginning of the forecast period, that area of low pressure moving up from the southwest, bumping into the cold air. It does bring a risk of some sleet or snow into the southwest, so Cornwall, maybe Devon there, and a little bit further along southern coastal counties. The chart here is showing the rain and snow rate. The one I've superimposed is showing forecast snow depths. And what we can see is there is some accumulating snow there being shown in parts of Devon and Cornwall. Potential for several centimetres, I would think, especially over the high ground down there. Definitely worth keeping an eye on just through the first day or two. Also, freezing fog could become widespread, or at least more widespread on some nights. So this shows the forecast 06 GMT, Friday the 16th. The grey and black shading is used to indicate the foggy areas. So you can see there, especially over England and Wales, it is forming in places. Definitely another hazard to be aware of. Transitional snow, though, as well, as I suggested, as that milder air moves northeastwards through the weekend, so in particular on Sunday. These charts are based on the GFS model, for one which the sequence used. The white shading here on the left is showing snow at 12 GMT on Sunday the 18th. By 15 GMT, so the chart on the right, it's moved northeastwards and it's turned back to rain in much of England and Wales by this point. And some of that rain actually looks quite heavy. I think significant accumulations of snow are likely over the northern hills and the Scottish mountains in particular. In the south, any snow is likely to be short-lived. Yet another potential thing to be aware of is strong winds. As that area of low pressure and weather fronts move up from the southwest, the isobars will become very tightly packed together. This is showing forecast gusts from the GFS 09 GMT, Monday the 19th, over 50 miles an hour across much of England and Wales, a little bit higher in coastal counties in the west and the south. Details are going to be changing. Of course, this is still quite a long way off, but as I say, there is that possibility there of rain, snow and strong winds all bringing some disruption for a time through the weekend and into the early part of next week. The rainfall accumulation charts for days 0 to 5, the ECM model on the left, GFS on the right, mostly dry. There is a little bit of precipitation there being shown in the southwest. I think that's associated with the area of low pressure, which is bringing the risk of rain, sleet and snow into Devon and Cornwall. Much of England and Wales, though, completely dry. In the northern half of Scotland in particular, and the west, some higher totals, because there is the ongoing likelihood of sleet and snow showers through the first few days in those areas. Going forwards to days 0 to 10, the totals have increased everywhere as that more changeable or unsettled weather pushes up from the southwest. Having said that, in central and eastern England, the totals are not very high, still in single figures in places, and these values are millimetres. The west of Scotland there looking the wettest according to the GFS. And in general terms, western areas on both of these look like having the greatest amounts of rain. So, a lot taking place through the first week. Do the deterministic models all support the scenario which the GFS was showing, the breakdown from the cold conditions through the first few days and it turning more unsettled but then potentially becoming colder again from the northwest? Here's a recap. Here is the GFS, Tuesday the 20th. This is a point where colder air is moving southwards, and as I've mentioned, potentially very windy. Look at the isobars there, packed tightly together. The Canadian model shows something similar at the same time. There are differences, of course, but the general pattern is for colder air there to be pushing down into the north of the UK, milder in the south, low pressure here to the southwest. It looks like it's going to be tracking somewhere across central counties, very, very mixed. The German icon, though, this one's quite a shock for the system. A very sharp northerly plunge again, moving down across all areas. A cold scenario quickly returning if this one is correct. Difficult to say where it will go, but it runs out to 180 hours ahead. This is 168, where it will go beyond the 180 hours. But in general, it does look to be setting up quite a potent northerly flow, more so than the Canadian and the GFS. The European ECM, a northwesterly or northerly moving down across the UK, probably quite transient with high pressure then moving back in from the Atlantic, but the general picture is similar. Finally, the UK Met Office global model also indicating colder air beginning to move southwards, milder though over southern Britain at this point. Reasonably good consistency between those global models, especially if the icon is put to one side for the moment. Changeable or unsettled at the end of week 1. Colder air more likely to be returning into the north of the United Kingdom. Milder conditions hanging on in the south, but the possibility of that colder air moving down in the days which were to follow. This chart, generated using data from the UK Met Office MOGREPS G ensemble model, reinforces the message. Each stamp, as they're called, shows the forecast pressure patterns from one of the runs in the ensemble model, and it's a changeable picture. Cold weather more likely in the north, possibility of rain in all areas, even snow in the northern half of the country. A very mixed picture, details uncertain at this point. So, how are things looking as we head into the second week and through it? Well, as ever, it's trends and probabilities at this range using the ensemble data. Here's the 16-day GEFS plot for London. Air mass temperatures across the top. There isn't a strong signal here. The runs are fluctuating around the average, the thick black line there, the 30-year norm, the ensemble mean. The purple line there dips below it, then it climbs a little bit above it. There is quite a big spread showing up though, and there are a few runs in there going for a significantly colder scenario. I think it's worth keeping note of that, certainly as we go through the coming days, to see whether their numbers increase or decrease. It could go either way. In terms of rainfall, well, there's an ongoing risk there. The number of spikes continues to be fairly even through the second week. Is it going to be snowing in southern parts of the UK? Well, the snow row shows how many runs in the ensemble are forecasting snowflakes to fall on a given day. The maximum value it can take is 33. And here it never climbs above 4. And that's right at the start of a period. We can see ahead there to Christmas Day. I'm not going to discuss that in detail, but the number of runs forecasting snow on each day through the second week in the London area are low, so you can read into that what you like. The 2-metre temperature data table for London, quite mixed, quite a lot of the light green there. Those are runs going for forecast maximums of between 6 and 10 Celsius on each given day. Still a reasonable amount of dark green though, runs going for maximums of between 1 and 5 Celsius. Also some yellows, those are runs going for between 11 and 15 Celsius, so those are the mild category. Difficult to read too much into this. There really isn't a very strong direction of travel being signposted by the ensemble data here. Probably close to average, maybe some colder incursions. Also, mild days are distinctly possible. Quite a mixed pot according to this data. Going up to Manchester, the air temperature part of the plot is similar to the London one, slightly more frequently below the 30-year norm for more runs dipping into that category. In terms of rain and snow, well, a number of spikes showing up there along the bottom. It doesn't look overly wet. The snow row counts are higher than they were for London, reaching 11 early on, then dipping to around 4 or 6 at the very end. I would say a low risk of snow, perhaps moderate early on, but it's certainly not out of the question, but Once again, it's not overwhelmingly backing the likelihood of snow. It's just suggesting there is that chance there. And remember, the snow row is indicating that snow is falling and not necessarily accumulating. 2 metre temperatures for Manchester. Similar to London really, except the dark green makes up more of the columns. Those are the cold runs, and the 6 to 10 Celsius is. The light greens are not so abundant. There's less yellow as well. Generally, therefore, a little bit colder as we're heading northwards. See if the trend continues. So up to Glasgow. This time there is more of an anomaly on the air temperature part of the plot. The purple line, the ensemble mean, is staying below that 30-year average really for much of the second week. Although there is quite a big spread of solutions. The thick green line, interestingly enough, on here was the GFS operational run, which I used to base the animation on, and beyond the 168 hours, which I took it out to, or beyond the first week rather, it went on to go for a very, very cold outlook across all parts of the UK. But it is down at the bottom end of the ensemble, particularly in the southern half of the UK, so I don't think it's a likely solution at this point. In terms of rain and snow, the number of spikes there continues to remain fairly even through the second week. I think it's a wetter scenario from further south on the whole, but also the snow row values are quite a lot higher. So the risk of rain and snow is ongoing through the second week. I'd say a moderate risk of snow in the northern half of the UK. Certainly, I think it's very likely that on some days, some parts of the north will be seeing snow through this period. The 2 metre temperature data table for Glasgow, continuing the trend of London being the mildest, Manchester a little bit colder, Glasgow colder again. Quite a lot of blues appear throughout week 2. Those are runs which are going into a really cold bucket, 0 Celsius to -8. The dark greens, though, are making up the bulk on most days. Cold conditions, 1 to 5 Celsius, and the milder ones relative to this part of the UK, the light green, 6 to 10 Celsius ones, are in quite a small minority. Quite a cold scenario, I think, been shown for the northern half of the UK through the second week, especially Scotland. The 10-day GEFS pressure chart, so this is generated by averaging out all of the runs in the ensemble. It's valid on Friday, the 23rd of December. Quite nondescript, really. High pressure to the south, low pressure possibly there to the northwest, but because it's blending all of the individual runs, it can give something of a misleading pattern here. Taking it at face value may be indicating average conditions, but I think it's more likely that we're going to be ending it with mild or cold on quite a few days rather than being close to the average, as I say, because this is just blending all of the individual runs and there is quite a mix of scenarios. ECM at the same time, the same plot. If anything, pointing towards high pressure to the south being more influential, that would be a less cold or less favourable pattern for cold conditions than the GEFS, although even that's rather difficult to be definitive about because we could see high pressure building up across the southern half of the UK, and that would lead at least to the potential for some cold nights to return. And is that possible? Well, here's the GEFS mean surface level pressure data table for York. I've just picked a fairly central location, annotated it as being no strong signal. There are some runs, a significant number, which are going into the orange bucket or even a little bit pink. Those are high pressure. Yellows, 1,011 to 1,025 millibars, close to average or above it. And the greens there and the blues and the purples, those are runs going for low pressure or lower pressure. Very, very difficult to draw too many conclusions here other than it could go a number of ways through week 2. Unfortunately, that's sometimes how it is. If you saw my update a couple of weeks ago, it was fairly clear from the model data, the evidence, if you like, that we were heading into a significant period of cold weather. Unfortunately, on this update, it's not very clear at all where we're heading into the second week and beyond it of the forecast period. So anyway, I'll try and summarize, put a little bit of flesh onto the bones. As I say, it's very difficult later on. Anyway, week 1, it begins very cold, widespread frosts and patchy freezing fog. There is a risk of snow quite early on in the southwest and snow showers in northern Scotland, also coastal counties at times. Towards the end, though, of the first week, it turns milder. Outbreaks of rain preceded by sleet or snow push up from the southwest. They're likely to move across all of the UK, and it may become very windy as well. Certainly something to keep an eye on towards the end of the first week. Gales, even severe gales being forecast by some of the computer models. Week 2, as I keep emphasising the details here, are open to a lot of modification. The best I can say at the moment is it appears to be a mixed outlook. Wet and windy days are possible, but also dry periods, more likely in the south. There is that chance of it turning cold, especially in the north, where snow could once again become an issue. And I'm going to say there's something like a 20% chance of cold weather becoming established across all parts of the UK. The reason I'm going for that value is because a number of the ensemble runs are pointing towards it. Also, there have been some of the deterministic operational model runs for GFS and ECM, which have been hinting that cold air could become established once again over the United Kingdom as we head towards and beyond the Christmas period. A very interesting prospect. So, there we have it. All in all, a mixed bag of weather with a good deal of question marks for week 2. But I think the most interesting aspect for me at the moment is whether this winter is going to follow 2010. That brought the very, very cold period in December, but it quickly ran out of steam. January and February were rather mild. Or are we going to see something more akin to 1978-79, which a few people have been speculating about? I think it's unlikely. It's not out of a question, though. I don't know, maybe the omens are there with all the industrial unrest and the inflation that we're experiencing at the moment. Perhaps the weather's going to follow suit. Hopefully, things should become clearer as we head through the coming days and weeks. If you stay up to date by watching my videos, I'll try my best to keep you informed. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this and found it useful. As ever, if you did, then please remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons below. Thank you for watching now. Bye.